Tell us about these rules. What are the rules proposed in terms of both the residency and the vehicles themselves?
So China's largest cities have rolled out tighter policies, draft rule policies, requiring only local residents, for example, in Beijing and Shanghai and Tianjin, to drive these private car hailing apps. All the other cities, the 24 other cities, have said that they require locally registered cars to run on the roads, and they also have higher requirements on what types of vehicles can run on the roads. That would be a huge blow to Didi, especially for the private car hailing business, and that's a significant part of their revenue. When we talk to drivers on the road these days, they say that the government and Didi both have not sent them messages telling them not to use the apps if they're not locally registered, but there are police raids carried out in certain parts of the cities these days.
Having spent last weekend in Los Angeles and this last couple of days in New York, I've had it with traffic. Is this really about traffic and the government's response to increasing traffic and starting to blame the ride-hailing apps?
Well, there's a discordance between the central government and the local administrations. If you look at the central government, they have legalized these car-hailing apps. But at the local level, because the city governments are in charge of issuing a lot of the permits for the taxi actual operations, and so this is probably a pushback from the cab drivers and the companies behind them, where they actually take a cut from the operating revenues. And so for Didi coming in and bringing millions more drivers, it is a blow to their business, and that's probably where we're seeing some of this pushback from.
It's really interesting, too, because it would seem, David, that they had the inside track of this being a Chinese company operating in China, and the government was going to favor them. That certainly happened on the national level.
Well, I'll tell you another way why it could make Uber feel glad they're not the ones involved. I mean, the answer probably is to go with the point that we just heard about the greasing of the palm, basically, of the government officials and the local government by the taxi industry. That's probably how Didi's going to have to get out of it. They're going to have to start basically paying more people, not bribery necessarily, but fees somehow. It just gets more expensive to do business, and it becomes less of a super cheap alternative form of transportation. That was probably inevitable anyway, but it is so hard for Western companies to do business in China because of the whimsicality of the regulatory regime that I think Uber was super fortunate to get out with such a big payoff.
Whimsicality.
Yes. I'm a writer. What do you want?
Whimsicality is fine with me. So there was a thought that one of the things that Uber was doing by stemming the losses in China was taking a step closer to an IPO. And I wonder if you get the sense, not just with Uber, but some of these unicorn companies are starting to think about cashing out their investors, growing up a little bit, and becoming reporting and publicly traded companies. Uber especially.
I think in general that may be happening, but I don't sense it as much at Uber as at some of the other companies. I think Uber is feeling kind of comfortable being able to raise capital at these astronomical private valuations. And frankly, if you look at Facebook's situation that we were talking about earlier on the show, if they had never gone public, they'd be able to do a lot of things to respond to situations that are putting them in a difficult position now that they cannot do when they have to keep churning the advertising crank to please Wall Street. So I could see Travis Kalanick being sympathetic to not going public.
Lulu, really quick, just about 20 seconds here. Do you think this is going to get resolved on a national level, or is it going to get resolved on a local level?
So Didi is providing feedback to the local bureaucracies these days. They're saying that they're more open to moderating the versions of the policies that has yet to be finalized. So we'll see in terms of how, they negotiate with the governments.